is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show live here on DSM Media's Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channels. Guys, first and foremost, if you are new to the channel, make sure you check us out on Twitter first at DSM_media. Hit that follow button. We greatly appreciate it. And while you're over on the Twitter page, make sure to check out the link tree in our bio. It will take you to every social media platform we are available on. If you guys want to be interactive throughout today's shows or any of our shows here on DSM Media, make sure to check out the YouTube link specifically. It is the best spot to get your thoughts, comments, and questions pulled up here on the screen with your host. I am one half of them today, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my left, my faithful co-host, Scotty. You can find him as well at Scotty Drown. Welcome to this late edition on this Friday morning. What's going on, my man?
Ah, man, not much. Happy Friday to you, man. I'm happy to get the show in late or not, man. We had to get this talk in today and talk Nick Nurse and talk Eagles schedule. So I'm excited, man. Happy Friday to everybody out there. It's the end of the work week, and that's always an exciting time, right? So I'm happy to be here, man, and hope your Friday's going well, brother. hope you have a good weekend ahead of you.
We're off to a suspect start here, man. You
gotta get that phone charger fixed, brother.
Well, here's the issue, right? It's the phone itself. That's why I'm pushing it off, because I can't wait to take it into Apple or somewhere and find out, oh, there's nothing we can do. You need a whole new phone and whatever that's going to run me. So I tinker with it. I play with, like, every night I got to, like, angle my phone just perfectly over, like, another object to get it to charge. And last night, unfortunately, thanks to the 6th longest game in NHL history, I stayed up for that for whatever reason. I guess, once you're invested in one overtime, you got to be invested in 4. And then that ended with 12 seconds left in the 4th overtime. Went to bed around 2 a.m., did not pay attention to whether my phone was charging or not, and therefore woke up to a dead phone, hence no alarm, hence late show start. But Scotty, on today's show, we are going to be unveiling our new Friday segment leading up until June 30th's NBA free agency opening for the 76ers. That is going to be our Sixers offseason wish list. So every Friday, we will give you a new wish that Scotty and I have come up with collectively here on the Phaithful Fanatics show for what would make a very successful Sixers offseason in our minds, what we want them to do. And then also, as we talked about on Wednesday at the end of the show, we're going to be breaking down the Eagles 2023 schedule. Finally, normally we would do that like the day after the schedule release, but that was smack dab in the middle of a Sixers playoff run, and we were very focused and honed in on them. So here we are getting to that schedule today, man. But let's start with the Sixers and their head coach vacancy. And Keith Pompey and a couple other reports come out last night that Nick Nurse sometime next week will be in town to talk and interview for that vacancy that is the 76ers head coaching position. Thoughts here, man? I mean, how surprised are you that Nick Nurse is the first candidate they're talking to and meeting with in person? Because obviously if you watch Wednesday's show, you know that he is Scotty and I's #1 head coach on the market for the Sixers to bring in place of Doc Rivers. So how surprised are you really that it wasn't, Monty Williams, who has a relationship with the Sixers organization, that it wasn't, Mike D'Antoni, who so many people are alluding to because of the James Harden connection? What do you make of Nick Nurse being the first head coach interview?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it shows that the Sixers' head is in the right place from the top down. So, obviously, Nick Nurse is the guy that, as you mentioned, we pinpointed on Wednesday as the guy that we want to coach this Sixers team. Now, Mike D'Antoni's interesting, right? He has the connections to Morey, to Harden. Even Embiid wanted him, which that, as you mentioned the other day, that seems to get lost in all of this talk about Mike D'Antoni. But that's not the point here. Nick Nurse, nonetheless, he's the guy that he's one of the most creative head coaches in the NBA, and I think that's what's intriguing about him. I think when you ask the question, why didn't the Sixers go out and get somebody, go after somebody like Monty Williams first, bring him in to interview him, or bring Sam Cassell in, who is already connected to the Sixers from Doc Rivers' staff. Obviously, Monty Williams was here a few years ago as an assistant, but I think the reason you see Daryl Morey kind of going away from that is just that it's Daryl Morey. This isn't Elton Brand. This isn't, the Sixers brass from before. This is Daryl Morey. He's his own person. He's his own, GM out there in the world. So he's not basing things off of connections to Philly. And I think that's a good thing here. I think it's not that you want to go away from somebody that's been connected to Philly from before and from the past, but you want to start with a clean slate, and you don't want to make choices based off of that. You want to make choices based off of their qualifications, what makes them the best coach for the job here with the Philadelphia 76ers, who's going to get the most out of Harden, who's going to get the most out of Embiid. And I know the skepticism with Nick Nurse, I think it comes from his personality. And I think that's because he has a very strong personality, and I think that's what this team needs. I get it. He may rub Joel Embiid the wrong way at some point, right? Like maybe he does criticize him harder than what Joel Embiid is used to, or maybe it's James Harden if he decides to come back, or Tyrese Maxey, whatever the case may be. But I think that's what this team needs. They need to be held accountable. They need a culture shift. And I think if we can get back to a culture where we don't look at ourselves as if we deserve something, right? I think that's kind of been where we've been at for a couple of years now. It's like, oh, we deserve this, we deserve that. And at times they don't play with enough energy, enough hustle, enough grit. I want us to bring it down a level and understand that we are desperate and we need to play that like we're desperate at all times throughout the regular season and throughout the postseason. And I think Nick Nurse can get that out of this team, because look at the teams that he's coached with the Toronto Raptors since Kawhi. Everybody says his career has been carried by Kawhi Leonard. I get it. That's how he won his championship. But mind you, coaches don't win championships without superstars, without Hall of Famers. That's how it happens. But to that point, since Kawhi left, he's been maneuvering. He's been using pieces that really shouldn't be getting you to the playoffs, shouldn't be getting you to a first-round matchup with the Philadelphia 76ers in 2022. But nonetheless, he orchestrated that team, had them playing very tactical and very technical and very hard. And that's why they were able to stay in that series. I think it ended up, we closed them out in 6, but they still got 2 wins against the Sixers.
Right. It was 3-0.
It wasn't an easy, series for the Sixers towards the end. So I think, when the Sixers go up 3-0 in that series, as you alluded to there, they're able to still pick up 2 more wins because he's able to make adjustments. And I think that's the biggest thing, man. He's known as one of the more creative coaches in the NBA, and that's exactly what this Sixers team needs. They need creativity. They need help.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you said. And I think the surprising thing that, that Nick Nurse is the first interview is the fact that, like, it never feels like the guy you want is first up on the board for the team you love, right? It just feels like when I looked at these candidates, even though a lot of people, on Sixers Twitter and other fans that I talk to share the same sentiment that Nick Nurse is their number 1 coaching candidate, it just feels like the 76ers would lean towards a Monty Williams or a Mike D'Antoni or something like that and not go the route we're looking to. And to see him first up is like, it could be nothing. It could be they're going to go through all of them and do their due process and, go and interview all 5 or 6 head coaches and then make their decision. Or Nick Nurse has a prime opportunity to capture this organization and Daryl Morey's attention at the moment and say, I am the correct man for this job. I think everything you laid out about Nick Nurse is 1000% true. I think for we talked about this the other day, but what I'm looking for really in this next head coach is a culture changer, a culture setter, right? And not that, like, I think people get it twisted by saying, oh, well, the Sixers have a lack of culture. No. There's a culture in every locker room, but there's a difference from a winning culture and a losing culture. And again, not that this series was necessarily, on the shoulders of Doc Rivers and he's 100% to blame, because he's not. There was a losing type of culture built in within this locker room. And now whether that's on your stars, whether that comes down to leadership and head coach, we're going to find out with this next regime. But a guy like Nick Nurse definitely brings a more relevant championship pedigree. Like, we know Doc Rivers is a basketball lifer. We know that he's going to be a future Hall of Fame head coach. We know he has the ring. That ring seems like a distant memory to not just Sixers fans, but to the NBA, the entire NBA world, right?
Yeah.
When you bring in a guy like Nick Nurse, who, yes, he won it on the back of Kawhi. He got lucky with the injuries in Golden State. It doesn't really matter. The bottom line is he was able to coach his team to be in that position in the first place, and then ultimately come away with their first ever championship.
Look at some of the situations the Sixers have been in where we thought, oh, this is their chance to go and get a champion this season, right? Like there were several moments throughout this playoff this playoff run for the Sixers where we thought, oh, this has turned the tide our way and we're going to win this series. We're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Last season, right, against the Miami Heat, Embiid comes back for Game 3 against the Heat, and we're thinking, oh, this is how we get back into the series.
Right.
Year before that, it's the Hawks, right? They end up beating whoever, and it creates this path to the Eastern Conference Finals that is way more realistic. They beat the Knicks
before us.
They beat the Knicks, right? And then we beat the Hawks, and then we just had to beat the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals at that point. So, like, we've had these things trickle down and have a good path laid out for ourselves, and we still haven't been able to capitalize on it. And to your point, all Toronto did, all Nick Nurse did is take advantage of his opportunities. We can't discredit him for that.
What Nick Nurse did also was beat, quote unquote, the best team in the Joel Embiid era.
The Jimmy Butler team, right?
And everybody's favorite player, Jimmy Butler, who we're not even going to get into that
Made
conversation.
him look very pedestrian in that series.
Well, Scotty, listen, I would obviously, in hindsight, love to have Jimmy Butler on this team and have had him for the last 3-4 years, right? But what a lot of Sixers fans forget is that Jimmy Butler did have an opportunity to win. Jimmy Butler did play in a Game 7 here, and Jimmy Butler scored 12 points in that Game 7, or
yes, it was
it was all bad shooting, by the way. And then he couldn't guard Kawhi for nothing. So just want to throw that out there for everybody that I can't believe we chose Ben Simmons over him.
We're not hating on Jimmy. It's just he did similar things here that everybody else has done.
Jimmy was not this player then, and Jimmy, to my belief, would not have grown into this version of Jimmy Butler if he had never left Philadelphia and went to Miami and played under Eric Spoelstra and got involved in that Heat culture, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have turned into this guy. I know we're getting off topic here. Not to mention, I think a lot of people forget Jimmy Butler's 33 effing years old. What he's doing in the postseason and his switch to turn it, it's kind of unprecedented, right? So to go back in that time for a second, Ben, I know he had critics because he wouldn't shoot and blah, blah, blah. Majority of the fan base loved him.
21 years old.
23 years old at that time. Already a multi-time all-star, all-defensive team at that time. Yeah. And Jimmy was going on 30 or was 30 looking for a max deal.
That's what's funny.
Who are you going to choose in that moment?
It's very easy
to see how everything fell out and played out for the 76ers and Jimmy Butler and say, how could you do that?
It's always easy in hindsight. It's always easy in hindsight, man. And that's the best way you can lay out that situation. Nobody's taking a 30-year-old Jimmy Butler over a 22, 23-year-old Ben Simmons
at that point in time. There was no past dunk. There was no character issues at that moment. There was nothing with Ben Simmons at that moment. And there were character issues with Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, exactly. Everywhere that he had been up until he got to Philly as well. So, he had a bad track record. Let me throw this to you, though, about Nick Nurse, because he's obviously amongst a very experienced group of coaching candidates that are out there, right? They call it the coaching carousel in the NBA, by the way. They apparently play musical chairs. We haven't experienced it in 3 years, so it's kind of fun in a sense. But with Nick Nurse, it's interesting because he has apparently he has interest from Phoenix Suns, and he also has interest from the Milwaukee Bucks. And so then you ask yourself, well, if Nick Nurse, if we feel that he's the number one candidate in the field, how do those teams and those fan bases feel when there's other options of like Doc Rivers out there that is just looming and sneaking around? I'm praying the Milwaukee Bucks hired Doc Rivers, to be honest, but that's a whole other conversation. when you look at those teams, it's like, well, if they offer Nick Nurse a job, will he choose the Sixers over the Milwaukee Bucks or over the Phoenix Suns, who have KD and Devin Booker, right? Or the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis? It's interesting because he does have a connection. This is what I was kind of talking about earlier. I wanted to confirm it. So I just looked it up here. As I mentioned, this isn't a connection to Philly as to why Nick Nurse is coming and doing this interview. It's a connection with Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey apparently hired Nick Nurse as his G League coach down there when Morey was in Houston. So Nick Nurse coached their G League team and obviously went through player development with all those young Houston Rockets players. So that's the connection, right? That's why Nick Nurse is coming in first. That's why we have the opportunity to potentially hire him as head coach. And I think when you look at the Phoenix Suns, when you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, it's all about connections in the NBA to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
And what makes Nick Nurse comfortable? I think it would be having a guy like Daryl Morey who he knows above him and have his help in building this team the way Nick Nurse wants it to be built. Yeah. So that's an interesting point as well. Just an advantage that the Sixers may have over the Bucks or the Phoenix Suns if it comes down to a competition for Nick Nurse.
No, it's a really good point, man. And I just when I look at that, how did you feel about that Daryl Morey presser?
It was very, very. First of all, I'll say it was very underwhelming. His energy, right? Like the energy just was not there. He honestly sounded like us right after we lost.
He sounded nervous.
He sounded nervous.
And
plan B for Harden. Like, what is that? Right? Yeah. Like things like that. Yeah. It wasn't a great press conference.
My point was the fact that he threw it out there that the players and James and Joe will not have a say in his next coaching hire.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, how do we feel about that? Because on one side, it's, you play for who I tell you to play for, and the GM's going to do his job and bring in what he thinks is the best fit to build this team. But on the other end, like, when you have a star like Joel Embiid, when you have a guy like James Harden, do they sign off in some form or fashion of this next head coach?
Right.
I was going to bring up one more point with Nick Nurse, and I'm dropping the ball on it, man. I am dropping the ball on this. Free agency. That was my point. To get to this wish list, right? So how important do you think it is, whether it be Nick Nurse or anybody, any coaching hire that the Sixers bring in, how important do you think it is that they get this done relatively quick and soon? Because yes, I know the playoffs are still going on. We don't want to get caught tampering. You're not supposed to be talking. Players have a general idea where they want to go, where their relationships are, blah, blah, blah. So how important is it to bring in the face, the voice of this team, a guy like Nick Nurse, who I'm just throwing it out there. We were looking at the free agent list, right? Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Chris Boucher. Those guys are free agents this year. If you bring in a Nick Nurse, does that attract a free agent like that? Like, does Mike Budenholzer attract a free agent like that? So how important do you think it is to get that vacancy filled quickly?
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially if it clicks today. Well, not today. Whenever Nick Nurse, I'm sorry,
right. Next week
as well. There we go. Okay, yeah. So I think it's very important if and when they bring Nick Nurse in for this interview that if it clicks, if it feels good, you get it done at the end of the day. I don't think you have to sit here and scout every coach and figure it out. I think if you know that he's the guy, you know he's the guy. We already know his reputation. We went over that. So to your point, I think it's imperative that they get this done fairly quick. Now, if you want to, look at at least 5 candidates, if that's like your thing, if you're Daryl Morey, then you got to get it done quick. I would say get them all in there next week and do these interviews and get a feel for it and make your decision. Because while we feel it's imperative, once again, the Phoenix Suns, the Milwaukee Bucks, teams out there without a head coach yet, they're going to feel it's imperative as well. They're teams that are trying to bid for a championship next season as well. So they're going to be out here attacking the coaching market very strong, I would imagine, as well. And they've been without a coach longer technically, right, than the Sixers have. So, yeah, I'm with Chile there. You cannot let him go to other interviews because I want Nick Nurse. I know you do. I know a lot of Philadelphia does, especially even if it contrasts Mike D'Antoni. There's a lot of people out there that just want Nick Nurse so that it's not Mike D'Antoni. And to that point, I'm fine with that rationale, whatever. I want Nick Nurse, and I
hate that. I'm not gonna lie, I hate that rationale. Like, I like it because it's like the guy we like.
Yeah, that's the only reason I agree with it, because it ultimately ends in Nick Nurse.
I hate dude, in anything, like just like in politics, right? I hate politics. I don't get into any of that stuff, right? But I hate when like people will vote against someone
just
or vote for someone just to go against the other one. Like, have an idea of what you like about the person, right? So if you want Nick Nurse, want Nick Nurse for more than a reason, because I don't want Mike D'Antoni, right? So what happens when you don't like Nick Nurse after 2 months, right? I will say, so let's unveil our new, this graphic. I'm going to have to fix the graphic, guys, because it's going to F up the screen in a second, but here it is. Nonetheless, our Sixers wish list, step 1. Hire Nick Nurse as head coach. Chili, Brett, that should make you guys pretty happy. Scotty and I's collective first step of the offseason, and who the hell knows, it could be completed by the end of next week. And by the time we get to step 2, where we lower that black box down, we could have step 1 completed already. So,
yes, sir.
Before we move on, I wanted to go back to this too. This is pretty funny. So for everybody out there that like wants something outside the box, I need to be that guy for a second. It's not going to be Jay Wright.
Yeah.
And I saw a couple Sixers beat writers talk about it on social media. Like
Dawn Staley.
Well, that I'm going to get to her in a second.
Okay.
But they basically said about Jay Wright how he wouldn't capture an NBA locker room. Like how he wanted, like the guy, like I know guys make the shift from college to pro, but trying to lead a team over the hump to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and NBA championship, Jay Wright coming from college isn't going to garner the respect from those grown men, right? And then I see like the Dawn Staley reports, and I'm just like, it's not right. But like, bro, if Jay Wright's not going to garner the respect from the locker room, is Dawn Staley going to garner the respect from the locker room? You know what I mean? Especially this locker room that involves James Harden and some personalities. Like,
and mind you, I think
coaches
they would be respectful, but I think capturing a locker room, that's like something. And I'm gonna like try to tiptoe around the line here, because there is a fine line of like talking about women and coaching
I'm not
sports, but like I think that's something that you have to integrate. That's not something where you can just bring somebody in and make them a head coach. I think that's something like Becky Hammon we saw down in San Antonio, where she gets groomed by Pop, and then you kind of pass
she's around or she's within the locker room and around the organization for a while.
Exactly. So like getting that experience first, then you get the respect, and then that respect is passed on from NBA players, from other executives. And so I think it's got to be more of an integration process. I know that sounds really bad, but it's just reality of when you're dealing with
you could argue it for Jay Wright as well. Like,
exactly.
James Harden going to care about Jay Wright's accolades at the collegiate level in the last 5 years.
Exactly. You want somebody that's been there in the trenches at the end of the day, whether that's an assistant coach or not in the NBA,
especially when we're talking about Jay, and I love Jay, bro. Top 5 college coach of all time.
You would bring in Villanova, guys. At least we finally get Villanova, guys. But I feel you.
Like, especially with the way Jay ran his ship at Nova. You shared the ball. He was like Hoosiers old school, bro. Bounce pass, share, like. You think James Harden and these dudes are going to buy into your style of offense and your leadership style?
How do you feel about Nick Nurse and how he would affect James Harden in his decision?
See, here's the thing. I guess I didn't realize when I first broke down Nick Nurse's involvement as a Sixers head coach. I know he is the ultimate chess player, and he makes so many adjustments within a game and game to game and series to series.
Yeah.
But I kind of always viewed him more like, I don't know why. I guess just from him like having some success against Joel, I viewed him more as like a tough, gritty, defensive type of coach. I think I misread the room. Yeah, I think he has a lot more offensive genius to him than I've really thought about. So I do, man. I think I mean, when he's coached guards like Kyle Lowry, like Fred VanVleet, like Gary, like he's coached scoring guards and like I think he would have a positive change on James Harden. I think he'd be really good with Maxey. I know people love the idea of D'Antoni with Maxey because look what he did with Harden. I like Nurse with Maxey, and I'm mostly intrigued by his fit with Joel, bro, because within that bickering, within that little beef of the him complaining about Joel's fouls and Joel publicly commenting back to him and all that. Within that, there is a respect. There has to be. I'm assuming here, but there has to be a competitive respect for, an NBA champion head coach in the last couple of years and the MVP of the league. And you put those two together, bro, you're grown men. Shake hands, talk it out, whatever you got. You might not even have to talk it out. Who cares? Move on and let's get down to business, right? So that's who I'd mostly be intrigued by, Nick Nurse, man.
I'm interested in that as well, especially for Embiid, because you look at like Pascal Siakam and his uprising as well, and the way he's used for Toronto, and I think just from an idealistic perspective, I think Nick Nurse could bring that urgency to get some lengthy wings into Philadelphia and get some of those guys. You look at Toronto; they had 4 or 5 different forwards that they could play that could play wing. Out on the outside. So I think that's another thing that he could bring, like that initiative, like somebody's got to bring it, right? Like that initiative to get some length and athleticism on this team.
He's different than D'Antoni. Now, don't get me wrong. None of the centers that Nick Nurse has coached have been Joel Embiid style of player level. But he's coached stretch 5 types of players. Marcus Gasol can stretch the floor and shoot it. Chris Boucher, the backup, can stretch the floor and shoot it, right? Now, they can't put the ball on the floor, and they don't ISO him out like he would do with Joel. But already having that comfortability with coaching a 5 that doesn't have to be down low or a lob threat, he'll know how to move her around.
And that's the biggest thing here from Brandon. He just runs an offense, like literally. That's
crazy to think
about. Be an upgrade in itself.
We gotta settle down because I feel like I'm talking about Nick Nurse like he's already.
I know, and then he's gonna go to Milwaukee, and then he'll be Milwaukee's great
ruin my life, right? So we gotta pump the brakes. One last thing about the Sixers offseason, and just to wrap up the Nick Nurse conversation, you mentioned like his depth and his wings that can come off and play. If there's one thing I've learned to value over this season and this playoff run and just watching the NBA over the last 2 or 3 years, I'm learning to value the importance of role players and depth because and even if you don't have like a serious, basketball respect for some of these guys, like, bro, I know we sit here as Sixers fans and we play like a Miami Heat team last year, and you're hearing Max Strus and Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin, and you're like, what are they doing? And you see the impact they have, and it's like, I like Tobias Harris, and is Tobias Harris a much better player than any one of those one-on-one? Yeah. But I would take 2 or 3 of those guys over just having Tobias Harris.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even you look at the Denver Nuggets, I think that's a good example, too, of just the right pieces put around, Nikola Jokic.
For the first time ever, bro.
Yeah, for the first time ever. It's going to be incredible. But you look at the Denver Nuggets, and the astounding thing that I've watched over the last few nights, just the difference in guys like bringing Aaron Gordon in, who's just a bruiser. He defends like all the tough forwards, and he rebounds, and he runs the floor.
Look what Bruce Brown is doing.
Bruce Brown was the next guy I was going to. He does a little bit of everything. He gets out on the break. They added KCP to this roster. He just shoots threes. He can shoot from anywhere on the floor. That's how you go out and you build a team, man. And Bruce Brown is exactly what the Sixers need.
But that's my point. Like by just valuing some of these guys, even though their name value might not carry a lot of weight, man. It's like, bro, I would love a Gabe Vincent. Yeah. I'd love a Max Strus.
Yeah.
These dudes are undrafted for Miami. Like,
my worry is that they turn into what they really are in Philadelphia.
Well, I think
they have been developed
that under that losing culture that we had in here, because any role player that played a legitimate role elsewhere, I think comes here. And when our offense is so focused around Joel, it's hard for those guys to really be themselves. You know what I'm saying? So
I agree. No, I agree with you. I actually was just pulling up the free agent list just to see, but we'll get into that later in the off season here.
I feel like my nose is bleeding, but it's not. Thank God.
Yeah, it looks like you're good, man.
All right, man. Let's switch on over to some football talk. Football Friday here on the Phaithful Fanatics show as we get into this Eagles 2023 schedule. You know what? Let me go ahead. Take over for a second. What do you think about the strength of the schedule? Obviously, the most difficult schedule in the NFL this season in terms of, last year's opponents. But I want to try to pull this up so we can share it on our screen.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, just looking at the schedule initially, it's very backloaded, was my first thoughts on the schedule. It could have been a lot more balanced, in my opinion. Like, you have that stretch towards the end of the season. It starts with, like, the Cowboys, Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, and then the Cowboys again. That's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-game stretch of literally Super Bowl contenders. Now, if you want to call the Cowboys, you don't have to call them Super Bowl contenders if you don't want to, but nonetheless, they're NFC contenders, I guess you could say. And then you have the Bills and Chiefs, who are perennial Super Bowl contenders. Correct. So that stretch right there, I just don't understand how we couldn't get like maybe the Chiefs towards the beginning of the season or the Bills towards the beginning of the season. But what it does is it sets you up to get off to a fast start. And that's how I'm looking at this schedule as of right now. But we can get into it game by game here. But those overall thoughts initially looking at it, backloaded, but it should, I don't want to say easy, should be able to get off to a pretty great start with the front load of the schedule.
No, I agree with both things you said. You can even throw Seattle in there in week 15, bro. Like that's on the road, Seattle. Like the game that I had the Eagles winning. I had to look. But it's still going to be tough nonetheless, coming off of at Dallas on Sunday Night Football the week before. I mean, it's interesting. The other thing that sticks out just timing wise, how do you feel about it? 1 p.m. game. How do you feel about that for the two of us that are going to be running Eagles pregame live this year? We have to take a break in the action from watching football to do our pregame show. It's like, damn, man, like I like doing it at noon.
Yeah, it does. It sucks. I'm looking at the schedule now just to count. So there's one. So Commanders we play at 1 p.m. early in the season. Twice at 1. And then the Cardinals late in the season at 1. Yeah, it's gonna be brutal, man. Just having to stop watching football in the middle of the day to do Eagles pregame. I mean, I'm not complaining. We would love to talk the Eagles every time, but I think it's just a little bit annoying. Yeah. I get it because they want to put us in primetime spots. Just because our team is that good, but it's annoying from
the recognition from the defending NFC champs. And I'll say one more thing, man. We're talking pregame shows, and it's like, I guess we technically got what we asked for, right? Go back to the Sixers season, and the middle of this, January, February run, and they're playing the Magic for the third time, and they're playing the Hornets for the second time, and it's like, yeah, we're going to do the shows, but it's like, man, just get me to the playoffs. Yeah. I mean, this year. Chiefs, Bills, Niners, Cowboys, Jets, Dolphins. Like, we're going to be like, all right, like there's a lot of intrigue and investment in each and every show. But all right, man, let's run down this schedule right now. Obviously, our thoughts and minds can change come September, and we'll do our final predictions then. But these are our very early Eagles record predictions, and you can see some of the comments under Tim McManus's post. You got 16-1, 12-5. All right, David. But let's start at week 1, man. Up in Foxborough, Tom Brady's retirement celebration in New England. This is a win. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but this is a win for the Birds. Whether it's Mac Jones, whoever it is, this is like the perfect tune-up game because they don't have a very talented quarterback. They lack weapons, and their offensive line is a little beat up. So it's like this is the perfect tune-up for that Eagles defensive line and Sean Desai to just pin your nose down and see what you got up in the trenches.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to start out the season, quite honestly. I mean, I was, expecting a bigger matchup for the defending NFC champions, but
it is very weird.
They go with a Super Bowl 52 rematch, I guess is
Right.
how they're going to pin it. They're going to have Tom Brady there.
Yeah.
But anytime this defense is going to be going against Mac Jones, we're going to get pressure on him. The defensive line didn't lose much now that you bring in Jalen Carter. I'm sure they're not done as well. We're not even, a month out from the season. So they'll make some more signings for that. But yeah, I'm looking at this Patriots team as kind of a warm-up game. It's a conditioning game to get into the season, get Jalen Hurts some run. Their defense is tough. They'll get a pass rush after him. Matt Judon, he's obviously one of the top pass rushers in the NFL. So Lane Johnson will get some nice tests early on in the season. Jordan Mailata, that offensive line. So it's a perfect warm-up game because you're going against Mac Jones, who is probably middle of the pack, probably even below that, probably below average. So it's a good warm-up for that as far as a quarterback matchup. Maybe you can get your defense going, get some turnovers, get some sacks against this Patriots team. And they added Juju Smith-Schuster, so there's some spice there as well. But nonetheless, the weapons are still not top tier, in my opinion, when you look at the New England Patriots. And I think it's a good game to start out with for the Birds.
It feels weird to call a game up in one of the toughest places to play, led by the greatest coach of all time, a tune-up game. But it kind of is for me when you mentioned the lack of weapons and the lack of a real, NFL starting quarterback at Mac Jones for me. I think this is the perfect tune-up for Sean Desai and this new look Eagles defense because it's like, all right, we get to see what Desai likes to run and what this defensive line can do without having to be too honed in on the opponent.
Yeah.
Right. Like if this was if this was Minnesota week 1, there'd be more of a tough task and Justin Jefferson and, apparently no Dalvin Cook. It's Alexander Madison time, but it would be more of a tough ask for the defense. But no, so I got New England as a win week 1. So do you.
Yeah.
What are these schedule makers doing? Why is our home opener a primetime night game against the Minnesota Vikings again in week 2? The hell? It's Monday Night Football in week 2 last year. It's Thursday Night Football on a short week against Minnesota this year at the link. But nonetheless, I have this with a victory. The Philadelphia Eagles are not going to lose their home opener primetime television to Kirk Cousins, who we know all about Captain Kirk's primetime numbers. Obviously, if you're looking at Minnesota, they lose Adam Thielen to Carolina, Dalvin Cook, whatever they decide to do with him. Like, I get it. Alexander Madison's a good back. He's younger. He's not the threat that Dalvin Cook, posed, in his prime. And even last year when the Eagles played him, you lose Adam Thielen. They really didn't bring anybody in to replace Adam Thielen next to Justin Jefferson, right? Or am I missing? Am I forgetting?
They did. I think they drafted. I want to say they drafted Jordan Addison.
You're right. But again, rookie that's unknown, right? So I had this as a win, man. What do you got?
Yeah, I got this as a win. You're talking about Kirk Cousins in primetime once again in the city of Philadelphia. I think, looking at it from that perspective, it's hard for me to pick against the Eagles in this one. And like you said, it's the home opener on a Thursday night. It's going to be rowdy out there. And it's going to be good weather, right? It's at the beginning of the season. So it should be primed for a good performance from the Eagles.
Way to jinx that, Scotty. It's good. It'll be a downpour.
Right. It'll rain. It'll be miserable, but hopefully not, because that's the day before I get married. So I'm hoping that's not the case. But I'm looking at the
hell yeah.
Yeah, bro, it's a great lead up into my wedding, Friday wedding. So it should be fun. Nonetheless, I look at this matchup and my initial thoughts, I guess you could even say my generic thoughts towards this game. The Minnesota Vikings have not gotten better, in my opinion, in this offseason. The Eagles have arguably gotten better. You could say they've stayed at least at the same level. But nonetheless, that's still better than the Minnesota Vikings. And that's how I look at this. Primetime game in Philadelphia. Yes, Minnesota Vikings, they'll be a competitive team this season upcoming, but are they better than the NFC champions? I do not think so, and especially not on their home opener night.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. Let's move on to week 3. We'll speed this up a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Tampa Bay post Tom Brady era. This is going to be interesting, man. Schedule makers again. They now give us the extended time off. Monday Night Football at 7:15. What is there 2 Monday night games?
Yeah, they're doing the 2 Monday night game thing.
Okay, cool. So we're the first one at least, right?
Yeah.
This is a win. I mean, Tampa Bay
Last
Baker year Mayfield struggled with the greatest quarterback of all time. Yeah, I don't really have anything to say. This to me might be a Monday night massacre for Tampa Bay.
It should be. If the Eagles are where they're supposed to be and where they, as far as expectations we have for them, this should be an easy win. Any of these teams without like a professional quarterback, I mean, it's going to be really tough for them to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. You talk about the first 3 matchups of the season. You could even say the first 4. You're going against Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins, probably the best quarterback of all 4, Baker Mayfield, and then Sam Howell. So, I mean,
right.
Come on. I mean, I'm taking the Eagles against the Bucks. I don't care if it's in Tampa Bay or not. Monday Night Football, yeah. Let's get it on in front of everybody.
Yes, sir. 3-0 on the season, and I'll extend it one more. 4-0 on the season.
Easy. Yeah.
First 1 p.m. game at the Link. Again, going to be a rowdy crowd the first time that Sunday tailgate gets to happen early on in the morning. To start the month of October, still going to be pretty nice out. Not like we're joking about the weather. It doesn't matter. But the vibes are going to be high is my point. And when the vibes are high like that, a bad team is not coming into Philadelphia and walking out with a win. All the ownership mess that Washington has dealt with, all the Carson Wentz issues, like you said, they rolling with Sam Howell. This is going to be a win for the Eagles. They're going to be 4-0.
I agree. Yeah, simply put, they're better than the Washington Commanders. They're at home. It's a day game. Like you said, it's the first Sunday that Eagles fans will actually be able to go out to the Link and have some fun before the game. And, I think going against Sam Howell, once again, it's not all about the quarterback. I get that. Like, it's about the team. But when you're talking about these teams head-to-head, the Eagles have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and they have one of the most complete teams in the NFL. So looking at a team like the Commanders, that's dog food right there. They're going to eat them up. So, yeah.
4-0 on the young year. And it's the schedule. It's the way it lined up, like you alluded to early on in this segment, but it's also kind of out of necessity, right? Because when we get to that gauntlet, like the Eagles are definitely good enough to win some of these games. We're not, saying that they're going to lose all those games, so we have to win all of these. But, when you're looking at, week 9 really through 15, it's tough. And then you get a Christmas Day after that. But 4-0, getting to week 5, out on the West Coast against the Rams. I think the Rams bounce back from what they were last year. Obviously, Matthew Stafford, hopefully another healthy Cooper Kupp, right? But they lose Jalen Ramsey, they lose Bobby Wagner, they lose a couple more pieces. They lose obviously Allen Robinson, who they lost Allen Robinson, right?
Or not? I don't know if they trade. He's on the trading block for sure.
They might have traded. Dude, my NFL off-season memory is foggy as shit right now. I'm gonna have to go back and like fine-tune myself. But they're going to be 5-0.
Yeah, I think this one will be a little bit tougher than the first 4, at least. But nonetheless, he got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It says here, I believe.
Yep. I remember.
Okay. Yeah. So Pittsburgh Steelers, that's where Allen Robinson is. We'll see what he does there. But this one's going to be a little bit tougher, I would say, being on the West Coast, being in LA, the time difference, it's a 4:00 game as well. But what I would say, LA Rams still not at the level that the Eagles are. Once again, this is a game the Eagles have to get. As you look ahead, you got the Jets and the Dolphins. You got to go and take this one against the LA Rams. If they're healthy, it will be a good game, though, I would say.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy to sit here and be like, and, it sounds very homerish. Oh, they're 5-0, but it's like, this is the way they started last year, right? And that was with Jalen Hurts as an unknown heading into the year.
Question mark.
There was a couple question marks and holes on the roster, and it's like you look at the offseason they've had so far, and you talk about the new DC that's interesting. You talk about more progression in Jalen Hurts' career. So I do see this as a 5-0 start. Week 6, this is where my first loss of the season comes into play. Up in North Jersey against the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Going to be a great game. Obviously, any of these games that I say are a loss are all winnable games for the Eagles.
Yeah.
But you have to pick a few, right? They're not going to go 17-0. So I'll have this as the first loss. You know how I feel about the Aaron Rodgers addition to the Jets. And yes, I know the baggage and the personality he brings to New York. But I think that the New York Jets are going to be in that conversation out in the AFC this year. So I'll say that the Eagles lose their first game here.
It's interesting. I'm actually looking it up because I know the Eagles have some crazy record against the Jets.
They do. They do.
Okay, so they're 12-0 against the Jets, it looks like, all time.
Yeah.
So it's tough for me to pick the Jets and say they're going to get their first win ever against the Eagles. It is Aaron Rodgers. The way I would pose this is that they have 2 back-to-back away games here in LA and in New York. They will lose one of these games.
Yeah.
That's the way I would pose it. Going to LA, I think it's just tough. An afternoon game on the West Coast, the time difference, all of that included. Like Brett said, the Eagles fans will take over LA, so that's something to factor in. But then you go to New York. If you are able to get a W in LA, I think it would be really tough.
Last year, I would have said we would have taken over New York as well. I think there is a lot of juice up there with those fans.
Yeah, adding Aaron Rodgers to the mix. And the reason the Jets are so tough at this point, and the Jets, while we first talked about the Aaron Rodgers acquisition, I don't want to say I'm down on them. I just am not as high on them as I was with the Dolphins, with the Bills.
Sure.
But with that being said, the Jets can beat any and every team. I mean, they have one of the better defenses in the NFL. They got weapons on offense for Aaron Rodgers, and he's just a much better quarterback than anything they've ever had.
They were a playoff team last year with below average serviceable quarterback play.
Exactly.
They just didn't even get that. And now you add in, a multi-time league MVP. And again, the baggage is something to keep an eye on. But listen, not that it means anything, but hey, man, he's with teammates. He's with friends at Madison Square Garden. He's going to the Knicks playoff games. He went to Rangers playoff games. He's embracing that New York City culture, even though they don't play in New York City. But yeah, this is the first loss. We got to speed things up before Scotty has to get off of here. But anywho, week 7. So we're in agreement that they're 5-1. Now, whether they lose to the Rams or the Jets, they're going to be 5-1 after week 6. Week 7, Sunday Night Football at home against the Miami Dolphins. Not really a sneaky tough game, but when you're looking ahead on the schedule, this is a sneaky tough game for the Eagles. Nonetheless, the Eagles will defend Lincoln Financial Field on primetime television again, and they'll come away with a win. I think Tua, it's down the line. We'll see if he's healthy enough, but I'll say that Tua makes a couple mistakes on primetime television, and the Eagles come away with a big victory.
It's going to be a great matchup. You're talking about 2 of the best cornerback duos, 2 of the best wide receiver duos going head-to-head, so it should be an explosive matchup. But like you said, I'm going to take the Eagles in primetime. Excuse me. With the Miami Dolphins coming up north to take on the Eagles in the link. Like you said, I think the Eagles take care of business at home. And I think being at home this season, having home field advantage in those games, they're going to be huge towards getting victories this season and getting the record that we ultimately want. So got to take advantage of the home games. This is only the 3rd one so far in the season. I think the Eagles will be excited to play that one at home, and they'll get the W. I do think the Eagles defense ultimately, if we're comparing teams, rosters right now, I think the Eagles defense is better. I think the pass rush is a little bit better. In the offense, you could maybe call them equal, although I would say the Eagles offense, I don't know. It's tough because the wide receivers on the Dolphins are so fast. It makes their offense dynamic, but you have Jalen Hurts on the Eagles with those wide receivers. Jalen Hurts is a lot more dynamic. Let's not forget the
offensive line and the rushing attack as well.
Exactly. So I would say the Eagles have a more dynamic offense as well, but that's up for argument. Nonetheless, I'll take the Eagles in this one.
Yeah, so 6-1. I'll make this quick. 7-1. They're not losing to that franchise. 7-1. Week 9, 425 at home against the Cowboys. I think they split with Dallas this year. I feel like the classic thing for this rivalry, even though it wasn't this way last year, is to kind of win on the road for whatever reason. I feel I could be way off. I have to go back and look, but nonetheless, I think the Eagles win this game. I think they're going to win at home and lose in Dallas later on in the schedule. So I have them at 8-1 heading into the bye week.
Yeah, I'm with you there. If you're gonna split with Dallas, you may as well win the one at home. Right. And I think you're looking at that away game in Dallas. That's after a gauntlet. So I think the Eagles have to get this one against Dallas and then see where they're at once they match up again later.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. So 8-1 heading into the bye. Now, This is where they hit a little bit of a block. I know they're coming off of it well rested, but again, I'm not predicting the Eagles at this point to go 16-1. I'm not going to be that guy. Yeah. So I had them losing the next two. I had them losing in Kansas City on Monday Night Football in the Super Bowl rematch. It upsets our fans. Why can't we beat Patrick Mahomes? They come home and we get beat by Josh Allen and the Bills in a very, very tough game. And I'll explain why they dropped both of those in just a second.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think when I look at this lineup, I look at Kansas City, Buffalo, San Fran in a row. And I see why because you want that San Fran game and you need that to be a win, I feel.
Yeah.
It just feels like, I hate to say it, it feels like San Fran is going to maybe want that game a little bit more than us. Yeah, I know what you mean. It never works out the way
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying because they better come in fired up and energized.
Yeah, because otherwise they're going to be very embarrassed.
But they are giving not only this team, but this city and 70,000 screaming fans all of the bulletin board material in the world. Whether it's Trey Lance, whether they love Brock Purdy so much they make him the guy, they are not coming into Lincoln Financial Field and winning this game. It ain't happening, brother.
So, I mean, it's tough for me in this stretch because obviously you can't pick them to win all three.
You're leaning Buffalo's the more winnable game.
Yeah, absolutely. Kansas City, it's frustrating, to lose to Kansas City in the regular season after you lost to them in the Super Bowl, but it's in Kansas City. I mean, that's home field advantage.
I'll tell you exactly.
We'll see where they're at, though. If they're if they're the same team from last year, then
and if they're 8-1 and out of a bye week, it's going to be a competitive ass game.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, if we're marking up wins and losses on the schedule, where am I looking for a loss? Probably in this spot right here. The one thing I'm looking at with the game within the game is Sean Desai and this Eagles defense against Patrick Mahomes, dude.
Yeah.
The last two times we have played Patrick Mahomes, which under Jonathan Gannon, meaning the Super Bowl and the regular season in 2021.
He's annihilated us.
The Kansas City Chiefs didn't punt.
Right.
Didn't punt the football in 8 quarters. So I'm looking at, all right, how does this new look Eagles defense? You can look, obviously the Dolphins game, the Jets game, the Cowboys game, those are going to be barometers for how the defense looks as well, because those are good quarterbacks, good offenses, speed, everything. The Kansas City one for a dude that has killed us in the last 2 or 3 years is the one I'm looking for. So anyway, however, no matter how we shape which ones are wins and losses, heading into Dallas in week 14, we have them 8-1, 9-3, we'll say. They were 8-1 into the bye.
The Buffalo game is interesting for it. I feel like it's a win, but it also feels like just like ravaging fan bases going at each other in that weekend. It's interesting. Buffalo. I'll roll with it though. It's tough because we're gonna lose 3 of those 4.
Yeah, so I do have them losing to Dallas as well, but I'll explain why in a second.
Because that would put us at 9-3 after San Fran game.
Right, then so 9-4.
And then
I'll make this very quick. They win the last 4 games of the season.
Yeah, so
So I have them at 13-4.
13-4. Overall, I would say that's a realistic record. Just not even factoring in which exact games they lose.
Well, that's the thing. It's fun to mark up the W's and L's. It doesn't play out the way you predicted to play out. They'll beat Kansas City, but they'll lose to San Fran or something like it'll play out that way, I'm sure, somehow. But nonetheless, I think that's a realistic record for this
team. 13-4.
Dude, if they go 13-4 against the league's toughest schedule, that's ridiculous. 13-4 equals another 1 seed. Another 1 seed is going to equal another Super Bowl appearance. So, man.
And how great is it that you get a look at Kansas City in the regular season first now?
Absolutely. To kind of learn.
To get a look at them, Buffalo.
You get a look at so many different quarterbacks, and that's the biggest thing for me when I look at this schedule. And And we know how good the Eagles are, bro. They just won the NFC last year. They were this close to beating Kansas City in the Super Bowl and winning the effing Super Bowl last year. My thing I'm looking at here is like we've been fooled by the defense before, and more so the defensive coordinator, because we look at the record and we look at the sack totals and the turnover numbers and the points per game average wise. And when you go back at those schedules and it's, man, look at what he did versus bad teams compared to good quarterback play.
Yeah.
Even the year before with Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Dak, destroyed by all of them. You get to this year, bro, you're playing the Dolphins. Yeah. You're playing the Dak twice. You're playing Aaron Rodgers. You're playing Patrick Mahomes. You're playing Josh Allen, right? So you're playing a lot of different dynamic offenses and some of the toughest teams in this league. That kind of prepares you more as a fan, at least confidence-wise, as to what this team is going to be come postseason. Even though we didn't need that last year, it's still going to be a fun ride this year nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree, man. You get a very early test.
A combined 13-4 record for the Philadelphia Eagles in our very early schedule breakdown. Obviously, throughout the summer, we're going to be talking lots more Eagles. I can't wait. Dude, I can't even wait for like OTAs and mini camps to start. I need something, obviously, with the way that the Sixers season fell apart. And obviously, we're going to be talking lots of Phillies on the show throughout the summer. They are a complete mess for me right now, man. They are just the same. They are consistently inconsistent. They get back to over 500 against Colorado. They make you feel good. And then all of a sudden they are swept out in San Francisco against the Giants, right? So
then you got the Cubs tonight, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe they can bounce back. I don't know.
Yeah. But guys, that is going to be all for today's show. Sorry about the late start. I'm going to have to fix my phone, I guess. Don't forget to check out our friends over at Manscaped and let them know that Team DSM sent you. Use promo code DSM, all caps, that you can see on your screen at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Again, promo code DSM at checkout on manscaped.com for 20% off your entire order plus free shipping. Let them know that DSM sent you. Your balls will certainly thank you. For myself, for Scotty, you can find all of our work at DSM_media on Twitter. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button. Shout out to our boy Darius D-Rab, who's normally in the comments for winning our Sixers jersey giveaway. It's another reason for you guys to subscribe to the channel. We constantly will be doing giveaways throughout the summer for the Phillies and the Eagles, so stay tuned for those. For myself, for Scotty, for DSM Media, have a great rest of your Friday and have a great weekend.
Go Birds.